explains exactly what he would do. Now, his plan involves, in part, requiring the Fed to disgorge its gold holdings and then distribute those gold holdings to the commercial banks in proportion to the dollars that they have, and then redefine the dollar's value such that it could absorb the gold and vice versa. There have been, shall we say, adjustments to that since, but that's Rothbard. Henry Hazlitt, who wrote Economics in One Lesson, from which many of us learned economics, I linked to him as well. I think probably the best person to go to, though, is a Spanish economist, I think one of the best economists in the world, who has a treatise that, if people read it, would revolutionize the world, and it's called Money, Bank Credit, and Economic Cycles, and the author is Jesus Huerta de Soto, and it is a brilliant treatise, and the last chapter is nearly 100 pages in which he explains how a free market system in banking with no government special privileges, no special sugar daddy, but where banking operates according to the same rules as the shellfish industry or anything else and gets no special privileges, how exactly that would work.
I understand that.
Before you go to another question.
Go ahead, Warren.
I certainly support greater accountability and transparency of the Fed.
Can you hold the mic a little closer?
And therefore, probably Ron Paul's legislation. I haven't read it, but from what I hear of it, I would support it. Your question was about a world currency. Gold was the last world currency that we had. It had many virtues, worked well for quite a long period of time, but was overly rigid, and as a result of that, ultimately collapsed. Any enduring system and the goal of a world currency, I think, is worthy, needs to be pragmatic if it's going to survive. What the governor of the People's Bank of China was proposing and referring to was the special drawing right, the SDR, of the International Monetary Fund. And I think that's back into the debate and deserves some serious consideration, as not as a replacement, but as a competitor with the dollar and with the euro, which are the two primary reserve currencies in the world today.
Well, wasn't that dishonesty, though, that we went off the gold standard? That's just a political decision.
I suppose I'm the one who's supposed to answer that. I think it was dishonest to abrogate the gold clause and thereby null and void contracts that people had entered into. That's a different proposition from going off the gold standard as the basis or as the peg to which the dollar is fixed. And that's a long, complicated topic that you're not going to give me the time for.
From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it being proposed that just the opposite of the Fed having less powers, that the government is proposing that the Fed will have the authority to bypass Congress and bail out virtually any entity that deems to pose a systemic risk? And I understand that there are like 500 banks that are on the list that are allegedly too big to fail. Somebody want to comment on that?
Well, the basic theme involved there starts with perhaps reading a brief essay that Alan Greenspan wrote when he was 40 years old, when he was a Randian, called Gold and Economic Freedom. The world went off the gold standard because of the rise of statism, the rise of the welfare warfare state. And the economists, unfortunately, were behind that. The trajectory of Greenspan's career is really the whole story. He caught Potomac fever at the age of 48, and he himself became a statist. It's great fun running the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve gives the economists a seat at the tables of power. They don't have to be just economists and journalists. They can actually call the shots. It's very heady. It's very invigorating. But beyond that, what is happening right now politically? The Obama administration, Obamonomics, is basically stealing the country from the American people, and it's doing it through the printing of money. Deficits don't matter, of course that's what Dick Cheney said, and Dick Cheney was a part of that same problem. Deficits don't matter. We can print the money. We don't have to ask the people to pay for it in taxes. We can simply print it, impose it on them, arrogate the resources to ourselves, and then we don't have to worry. the nature of why this is all about politics. And indeed, Alan Greenspan wrote about that very, very succinctly in Gold and Economic Freedom. That's what it's all about.
Gene and I agree on many of the things that may happen the next couple of years, which would mean vastly increased inflation by traditional standards, and of course, a devaluation of the dollar and other financial problems. That will trigger, I hope, a robust debate about the mistakes that got us here and how to get out of them. Part of that debate should include what my worthy opponents are proposing, but we also need another proposal. We need a proposal for people who are not going to buy that package, and we need a proposal for a slimmed down, streamlined Fed along the New Zealand model, and that other countries, by the way, have adopted it since then. And I'm not saying it's politically easy, but it's certainly more politically easy than what they're proposing, and it has worked.
Tom?
Okay, but if we want to talk here about what's right, what's wrong, what's the best outcome we can aim at, then it seems to me that this solution whereby we should have just a nicer Fed that isn't going to do as crazy things, I mean, this is like, should I have a door with a lock on it, or should I have a door that has a piece of paper that says this door is locked? I mean, why would I support that? But beyond that, it seems to me there is no moral or economic reason to have this money monopoly system. And I think people who favor a system like this, that, as I showed in my remarks, actually does harm people, and I actually believe causes far, far worse financial problems than any other system. I think we need to, it shouldn't be the people who favor a free market who have to be on the defensive. It should be people who support this monopoly system. Now, F.A. Hayek, who won the Nobel Prize in 1974, in the late 70s began to argue that there is no reason, if you want to be a non-utopian, to believe, to expect governments to give you good money, especially governments with the ambitions of the United States. You have no reason other than mere superstition to believe this. And he says, historically, it is a mere accident that governments have been in charge of the money monopoly. And why do you think that is? Because they're just looking out for the common good. They just want to give us a good medium of exchange we can use for our transactions. Of course not, because they want to be close to the source of the production of money. It seems to me if we believe in the free market, then all this Rube Goldberg nonsense about special drawing rights is utterly superfluous. What is to prevent the free market from producing money the same way it produces any other good? Money is a good. What's the problem?
Warren?
There is no problem with market-provided money, and most of the money that any of us use is privately produced in the private sector. What the government has a monopoly on, and what a monopoly is needed for, or at least highly helpful, is the unit of account. All of the private monies, your Visa credit card and debit card and mobile phone payments, which are very popular in Kenya and other African countries, all kinds of ways of paying things, not just the old-fashioned check, which is also privately produced by banks, all have their value denominated in a monopoly unit of account, the U.S. dollar. We cannot easily give that up. You mentioned too big to fail and a list of 500 banks. That's a fiction. There is no list of banks that are too big to fail, and it's certainly nothing like 500. But I think giving the Fed, I very much agree with John's points, giving the Fed added powers to deal with systemically important too big to fail institutions would be a very big mistake. We certainly need more transparency and information about what non-bank financial institutions are actually doing. The AIG debacle was a big surprise to everyone, but I favor, as John does, stripping the Fed of its supervisory powers, sharply narrowing its focus on monetary policy, preserving the value and integrity of that unit of account. And again, virtually all money is privately produced, so let's not raise fictions here.
Well, let me pose
May I just speak to Warren's point about the unit of account? Look, Warren, a brief economics lesson. The market prefers a single unit of account. There are very, very powerful market forces that produce it. In fact,